Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit the subscription, all of that good stuff. So, over the past few days, weeks and months, we've been hearing a lot about Dillian White being the victim of boxing politics. Now, I've made a couple of videos on this, expressing my opinion on this subject matter. So I'm not really going to go too much into that topic again. But one thing I've noticed from fans while looking at this is the reluctance to give Dillian White any sort of criticism in his career. You know, Dillian White, a guy who dines himself out on being the can man, anybody can get it. He'll fight anyone, anywhere, anytime. That's the narrative when I hear Sky Sports Matchroom talk about Dillian White. That's the narrative I hear from his fans. He just wants to fight the best. Well, that's not strictly true. Dillian White has outright turned down fights, and he's poured cold water on potential fights. You know, the guy who wants to fight anybody. You know, the guy who is so desperate for a title shot. The same guy who turned down a title shot against Anthony Joshua last year. You know, he could have fought Anthony Joshua at Wembley in April last year, but he turned it down. He turned down a career-high payday with a chance to become unified heavyweight champion and with a chance to avenge his only professional defeat in his career. So the guy who's so desperate for a title shot turned down that title shot. I keep on hearing about the WBC route. That's the route Dillian White wants to go down. Well, at one point, Dillian White was open to both IBF and WBC, right? When Dillian White was ordered to fight Kubrat Pulev by the IBF, he was happy with it until Matchroom lost the purse bids to Kubrat Pulev's people. Pulev's team won the purse bids and they wanted that fight in Bulgaria. And Dillian White or his team or both ducked that fight because it wasn't on their terms. And this is a theme that's run throughout Dillian White's career. He wants everything on his terms. So he turns down Kubrat Pulev because he didn't want to go to Bulgaria. We heard all kinds of false accusations that the money wasn't there, etc, etc, which turned out to be nonsense. Hughie Fury went over there. He lost that fight, but he got paid. You know, all sorts of nonsense, BS excuses for why Dillian didn't fight Kubrat Pulev. But crickets, no criticism. Dillian White seems to have a free pass for ducking top 10 heavyweights. Ducked Anthony Joshua, ducked Kubrat Pulev. The other thing, Dillian White, so keen, so desperate for a WBC title shot. Well, Dillian White, he had victories over Chisora in the first fight. He had a victory over Robert Helenius and Lucas Brown. During this time period, Dillian was number 1 rated in the WBC for beating Robert Helenius. That was a fight for the WBC silver title at short notice, by the way, and Dillian White was the number 1 contender because he won the silver title against Helenius. And after he beat Helenius, Chisora and Lucas Brown, Dillian White felt obligated, he felt entitled to a title shot without fighting an eliminator. He was saying how the WBC were not giving him his shot, despite not even fighting for an eliminator at this point. Soon after the Lucas Brown fight, the WBC, they order Dillian White versus Luis Ortiz. Dillian White, Eddie Hearn, his team poured cold water on that fight. Oh, why should we fight Luis Ortiz? Eddie Hearn was going to complain to the WBC because they ordered that fight. You know, it wasn't convenient for Dillian White to fight Luis Ortiz because it wasn't on his terms. Just like the Kubrat Pulev fight wasn't on his terms, he didn't get things his own way, hence why he pulled out. And we saw the same thing with Luis Ortiz and the WBC. As soon as that fight got ordered, all we heard was Dillian White and Eddie Hearn complain. By the way, at this point, Dillian White hadn't even fought a WBC final eliminator. Yet he was out here acting like he was entitled to a WBC title shot. You know, he was treating the Helenius fight as a final eliminator when it wasn't. It wasn't a final eliminator. At this time, the only guys Dillian beat was Helenius, an old Lucas Brown, and Derek Chisora. And he thought he was entitled to a title shot. Once the Ortiz fight was ordered, you know, he kind of changed his tune and he threw his toys out of a pram. Oh, And then he started insulting Luis Ortiz. Old tease, he's an old man, he's not worth shit, etc, etc. You know, despite Dillian White just having beat a 40-year-old Lucas Brown, despite Dillian White going on to fight a 40-year-old Mariusz Wach and a nearly 41-year-old Alexander Povetkin. But Luis Ortiz was too old. You know, he was too old. Complete hypocrisy from Dillian White. I'm just tired of a Dillian White narrative. People out here acting like this guy is this hard-done-by warrior who's never had an opportunity, who done everything the sanctioning bodies asked of him, when it clearly isn't true. It's not true at all. The guy who will fight anyone. The same guy who will fight anyone, but he won't fight Alexander Usyk because he can't speak English and it wouldn't attract the casual fan base. These are Dillian White's words, not mine. He said he wouldn't fight Alexander Usyk because he couldn't speak English and his profile wasn't high enough. My man then goes on to fight Oscar Rivas, a guy who can't speak English and a guy who's got even less of a name than Alexander Usyk. Why is Rivas okay, but you're pouring cold water on a potential fight with Usyk? You tell me, Dillian White fans. You tell me. You know, just complete nonsense from Team White, from Team Matchroom, from Eddie Hearn fanboys. Complete nonsense for months and months and months now, and quite frankly, I am fucking sick to death of it. I'm sick to death of it. I find it hard to feel sorry for a guy who's turned down multiple opportunities. I really do. Now we've got clowns out here prioritising mandatories over undisputed. You know, despite everyone and their mother saying undisputed is the main goal in boxing, the end goal, you know? But because it's Dillian White, people want to see him get his title shot before undisputed. I can only speak for myself. I don't want to wait for undisputed. I want this shit to happen as soon as possible. I've not seen an undisputed heavyweight champion in my boxing lifetime. Lennox Lewis was of course the last, and I was far too young to have experienced that. I've not seen this in the heavyweight division. I don't want to wait, quite frankly. I really don't. I think Bob Arum had the best solution to this predicament that the mandatory situation is in. Why not Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua get their next fights out of the way against Wilder and Pulev? Joshua and Fury fight for undisputed. In the meantime, the two mandatories for WBO and WBC, Alexander Usyk and Dillian White, why don't these two guys square off and the winner then fights for undisputed, the winner of Fury Joshua? Why can't we have that solution? Why not? I don't want to wait for undisputed. I really don't. I keep on hearing people out here say how important undisputed is, yet they don't sound that way right now. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But as we know, my solution, Bob Arum's solution about Usyk versus White, we know that's not going to happen, as we know, you know, Alexander Usyk doesn't speak English, so he can't fight Dillian White. What are we talking about? Get the fuck out of here, man. Dillian White, the guy who'll fight anyone, anywhere, anytime. Sick to death of that narrative. Complete nonsense. Complete nonsense. And by the way, Dillian White does have good wins. I liked the Parker win. Former champion, good win. I felt the Oscar Rivas win was pretty good. Yeah, he was kind of unheralded. Not a lot of people knew who he was, but I was following Rivas for quite some time, and I always thought he was dangerous, and he proved that against Bryant Jennings. Another good win for Dillian White. He's also got the 2 wins over Chisora, which are pretty decent, and even the Helenius win. You know, Helenius went on to beat Adam Kalnacki. So I'm not sitting here and saying Dillian White hasn't fought anybody. I'm not sitting here saying Dillian White is a bad fighter, he's got a terrible resume. That's not true. That's not true. My whole point is, why is Dillian White immune from criticism from the way he's managed his boxing career? You know, about the fights he's turned down. Why is Dillian White immune to criticism? Why is this never reported in the media? You know, when they talk about Dillian White's title predicament, nobody ever brings this up. But it is what it is. I don't expect this to change anytime soon. You know, Sky Sports News are not going to report on this. The Matchroom fanboys are not going to mention this. They haven't mentioned this. And by the way, I've come to realise the Matchroom fanboys are pretty much as bad as the LDBC. Yeah, maybe they're not as vulgar. They're not as pond life-like, I guess. But at the same time, their fanboyism is at exactly the same levels as the likes of the LDBC, so I don't expect these guys to really speak on these issues. But there we go, man. You know, the boxing scene is full of fakes and full of people pushing narratives. You know, certain fighters will get pulled up on their comments, like Deontay Wilder, like Tyson Fury. Everything these guys say will be gone over by a fine-tooth comb, and anything they say that could be criticised, they'll be criticised for it. But Dillian White clearly isn't held to that same standard. You know, Dillian White, the fighter, who's ducked as many fighters as most of the other top heavyweights, who said as many silly things as most of the other top heavyweights, but for whatever reason, Dillian is immune to criticism. Why is that? You guys are going to have to do me a favour, you know? Why is that? You guys tell me. Why is Dillian White so immune to criticism? Why is Dillian White free to duck anybody he wants without widespread criticism from fans and media? You guys are going to have to tell me. Share your thoughts below. Peace.